In the 80s and 90s, we grew up surrounded by iconic characters. Pac-Man, Mario, Sonic, Pikachu, Q*bert. Remember Q*bert? Hit after hit, character after character. You could draw them before you could even spell your own name. Little Addy wasn't too bright. And maybe it's just me, but over the last 20 years, something's felt off. New games still come out, and some are even great, but the characters don't seem to stick like they used to. And I don't think it's the nostalgia talking, could be the alcohol. 30 years later, Pikachu's still the most recognizable video game character with the kids. But ask them about anyone from the last few years, good luck. What happened? Where did all the iconic video game characters go? I've been thinking about this question for the last 2 decades, and as a contract character designer, pixel artist, and incredibly iconic character myself, I think I've got some answers. But first, what makes a character iconic in the first place? Now, there are a lot of design principles that can contribute to a character becoming iconic, and we'll get into those later. But for now, let's keep it simple. An iconic character is one with broad, long-standing cultural appeal. Broad meaning most people, even outside of games, recognize them. Your dad has an opinion on Mario, or at least the Italians. I think the long-standing aspect is important because it rules out fads or trendy characters. It's about staying power. An iconic character doesn't just pop off for a year and then disappear on their way to pick up cigarettes from the store. They're always paying their child support because they retain their value for a long period of time. Now, that doesn't mean a newer character can't be iconic. It just means we have to zoom out and look at cultural trends, Google trends. Although iconic can feel subjective, search interest over time gives us a rough way to measure cultural relevance. If a character still shows up in searches years or even decades later, that tells us something. And what I found was kind of sad. Mario, Sonic, and Pikachu all have lots of search interest generally trending upwards, whereas newer characters like some of the cast from Overwatch, Undertale, and a couple of other indie games have much lower search interest that's trending downward. Surprisingly, Hollow Knight bucks the downward trend, probably because there's a new game coming out 2 years after whenever you've seen this video. But what really shocked me was how low the search volume was for the most popular characters in Minecraft, especially since the game itself surpasses even the top dogs like Mario and Pokemon. But at the end of the day, even Pac-Man has a more healthy trend line than pretty much any of these newer characters. Now, I think one of the most important things to note is that this isn't about quality. These are great games, but the characters just don't seem to catch fire the same way. So what's going on? I think it's a few things, but first, let's talk about what it's not. I don't think it's a marketing problem, or at least not entirely. Sure, good marketing campaign can put a character in front of millions, but it can't make people care. I mean, just look at Concord and Marathon if you need proof of that. And sometimes, the more you see a character, the less appealing they get. So yes, marketing can be important, but only if the character is something we actually want to see more of. They have to have some amount of appeal. Now, I don't want to say that today's character designers have an anti-appeal philosophy that's contributing to the decline of iconic characters, because I want to say they have an unappealing philosophy because it sounds funnier. Appeal can be a touchy subject because people often mistake it to mean objective beauty or somebody's subjective preference towards art. And if anyone in certain art schools or online communities suspects you're talking about anything to do with some idea of objective beauty in regards to art design, they'll flip out. I'm sure even including graphs in this video will make some of you froth at the mouth, you disgusting animals. But when I'm talking about appeal, I'm talking about the codified principle of appeal from The Illusion of Life by Frank Thomas and Ollie Johnston, 2 of Disney's original 9 old men who shaped classics like Snow White, Pinocchio, and Sleeping Beauty. These Golden Age animators were obsessed with appeal, judging an artist's work by an objective standard. A drawing that is complicated or hard to read lacks appeal. Poor design, clumsy shapes, awkward movement are all low on appeal. Viewers enjoy watching something that is visually appealing. In live action, the actor has charisma. In animation, the drawing has appeal. This philosophy of appeal was so influential, you can trace direct lines from their work to iconic characters like Mario and Mega Man. But designers who reject this philosophy, they're the ones giving us characters like this. Now, I know what you're thinking. I sound like some beautiful beta chat incel who thinks every character should exist on a scale from baby to babe. And you'd be right. And you'd be wrong. Because as much as all these ugly characters suck, this sucks too. Appeal, as Disney's animators saw it, isn't about conventional beauty. It's about shape, balance, and form. Some of the most beloved characters aren't conventionally attractive, yet they're oozing with appeal. So no, I don't think that designers should be taking the extreme view that an appealing character is one you'd be catching on the dating apps. But I also don't think that they should be taking the opposing view that appeal is just random luck or pure subjectivity. There's enough research to show that that's not the case. I've got a whole video on how over-designed characters like those in Marathon tank appeal by messing with processing fluency. If we're ever going to get more iconic game characters, I think designers are going to have to take a middle ground between these two views. The people in our lives don't all look like models or movie stars, and character designers can capture the essence of these people without having to make them purposefully ugly or fuckable. So although appeal does follow some pretty objective standards, it's also true that beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Two things could exist at the same time. Everyone has their own personal taste, but too many designers are laser focused on their own personal taste instead of the people they're supposed to be designing for. They have too much of an artist-centric mindset. Now, there's a saying I picked up working in graphic design teams over the years. Designers know they're not artists, but artists think they're designers. Now, I think this might sound like splitting hairs. Both artists and designers draw pictures, but their mindsets are completely different. For most artists, the goal is self-expression, so they judge their work by one question: did I capture my own intent? Designers, on the other hand, make things for you, the audience. If a chair doesn't fit your butt, it's a bad chair. If an interface confuses you, it's a bad interface. Design is about solving a problem within set parameters and speaking clearly to an intended audience. I know it doesn't sound as sexy as splurting a bunch of paint on the canvas. Oh, take Mario for example. His overalls aren't just a fashion choice. They make his arms easier to see against his body so you can instantly read his running motion. And his mustache was added to give his nose and face extra definition on those tiny low-res sprites. In fact, almost every original Mario character was shaped by real technical constraints, not just because Miyamoto thought it looked cool. And perhaps as games have shifted away from having such restrictive technical constraints, it's allowed for more self-expression at the detriment of good design. Artists now have the power to add 30 jillion pieces of flair on their polygonal anime waifus, but they never stop to ask themselves, at what cost? Good designers can't be distracted by all that fancy tech or even their own ego. Sometimes what you want is actually terrible for the character and therefore terrible for the player. All the great iconic characters spoke to us. They became ours, and they inspired us to create characters of our own. But even for us youngins that wanted to make characters as good as Pikachu, or I'd settle for even as good as Mr. Mime, there really haven't been any solid resources. If you spend any time online, you might have heard much of the same advice when it comes to character design. Strong silhouettes, shape language, all of that. And although those can be very important, they're useless without having any underlying meaning for your character in the first place. But for a designer trying to figure out how to find meaning for their characters, they'll run into a prevailing design dogma. That being, a good character design should be motivated by their backstory, the universe, the lore, their psychological makeup, and that's wrong. All that can make a great character, but it doesn't make an icon. Nobody cares about Mario's inner life. Nobody's breaking down Pikachu's emotional arc. Sonic isn't a philosophy thesis about man versus egg. They work because you understand them, not because you relate with them. But instead, you have many designers being taught to treat their characters like props in a universe rather than symbols that transcend it. It's the difference between classic Sonic and the Sonic Boom redesigns. I like to call this diegetic design. In film, diegetic means something that exists inside the story world, like the Cantina band music in Star Wars, or this text in the sky. Take Monster Hunter armor. It looks amazing if you know the creature it came from, but out of context, it's just some fantasy armor in a sea of fantasy armor. Diegetic characters are only distinct within their own universe or story. And in a lot of cases, that's what we want. Sometimes you need a very specifically shaped cog for your big contraption. That's great, all right? I know I sound angry, but I actually mean it. But diegetic design is completely at odds with iconic character design. Iconic characters need to be flexible. They need to work anywhere. And if a character is going to survive, they need to spread like a virus. The market shifts, players move on, genres die. And when that happens, icons need to make the leap into other genres, into movies, into cartoons, merch, everything. The more the better. The more you tie a character to their world, the harder it is to pull them out. Icons aren't just characters trapped in a story. They're logos with personality. And if the designers of today are going to become as good as the designers of yesteryear, they're going to need to throw out these bad concepts and replace them with some new ones. At their core, I think iconic characters share 4 things. 1, they have a clear category. Category just means, what is the thing? How do I categorize it? But essentially, in order to love a character, we need to understand it first. For instance, did you know that I'm a rose, mayhaps? Now you're free to love me. If you can't describe your character in 3 words or less, they're already losing clarity. Mickey Mouse, Hello Kitty, Spider-Man, Mario, the plumber. Our brain needs that category or concept to make sense of something. 2, simple but distinct. Simple doesn't mean boring. Think of it like a melody. The most memorable songs, a kid can hum them. The best characters, a kid can draw them. They're easy to understand, simple to replicate, but distinct enough to stand out forever. 3, non-diegetic. Icons survive outside their universe. Their core features like Sonic's spikes or Pikachu's cheeks do the heavy lifting. You shouldn't need to explain their lore to recognize them. If they only work in their canon setting or their perfect world, they're not flexible enough to last. And the last one, culturally agnostic appeal. Now, be careful of trend chasing. When you base your character on a fashion fad or subculture or some hyper-specific niche, you put an expiration date on their appeal. I'm thinking things like goth characters or skater. Yes, you may appeal to that specific audience, but an iconic character needs to appeal to everyone, not just today's micro-genre. Iconic characters don't just help sell games. They're something to share, something to connect over. I made friends because of Pokemon. I got to play Mario and Pac-Man with my dad. And in a world that's getting more disconnected, more isolated, we need more shared characters. Maybe I'm just old and out of touch. Love you. Bye. Mwah.